Welcome to Shaping the New York City Skyline, a podcast that explores the stories behind the buildings that shape our city. With your hosts, David Shamshovich, Brenda Slokowski, and Camilla Almeida.
Hey guys,
Hey,
welcome
everybody.
back.
Today's episode, we had an amazing person, Matthew Tritt, from Greenlight Consulting and Management. It's a firm that he started when he entered the construction industry after having gotten some experience when previously he was really aiming to become a film producer and director, and even had a movie in Cannes that we spoke about.
That's one of the things that I really love about our podcast. We get to meet all of these different people from different realms of the real estate industry in New York City who are shaping the New York City skyline. But I never would have known that owner's rep or owner's consultant, this kind of role in the industry even existed. It opens the door to so many new people in the industry, and seeing how everyone finds their niche and it just works for that person. Like Matthew was meant to do this owner's rep role, given his history as a project manager, and then just kind of like expanding that to his like consulting company and really taking an active lead and making sure that your big picture and your small picture all make sense for your development and your project. And I just really enjoyed meeting him and seeing this new role.
We deal with owners reps, certainly, but everybody has their own way to go about it, and we don't exactly get to question them and say,
right,
so what value are you providing? How are you helping? And it was great to see what the methodology was, that he has certain specific project managers that he can call on if it's an architectural thing, or if it's a construction thing, or if it's dealing with attorneys like us, and God knows it could be difficult to deal with attorneys. At the end of the day, the goal is get an owner's rep, but why? Because do you want to be dealing with all these aspects that you don't necessarily know, or do you want to be concentrating on your vision as a developer?
He has the experience of dealing with the smaller details on every project, so he knows what he's looking out for. And if one of those details happens to be missing, he can point it out to you and say, wait a second, you're missing 1, 2, and 3. Let's make sure that's included.
Yep.
That kind of experience really is invaluable when you're dealing with such large scale projects like we do.
For sure, we all know how good guidance is important.
Oh, yeah.
Everything.
That's
Amen.
for sure.
Contact me for all your guidance needs.
But without further ado, here's Matthew Tritt from Greenlight Consulting.
Woo!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Shaping the NYC Skyline. Today's guest is Matthew Tritt. He is a guest who proves that life's most fascinating journeys often start in unexpected places. Matthew went from the glitz and glamour of film school, complete with a short film showcased at the Cannes Film Festival, to sweeping construction sites. But don't let that pivot fool you. He's no ordinary builder. Matthew is the founder of Greenlight, a boutique owner's rep and construction firm that's all about getting to the heart of the matter, whether it's project management, adaptive reuse, or keeping developers out of hot water, which we, of course, appreciate.
Right.
He has a knack for turning chaos into calm and a vision that combines the precision of a filmmaker with the grit of a seasoned construction manager. Matthew's built an incredible career helping clients see the movie of their projects before the first nail is hammered. From restoring historic facades to bringing workforce housing to life, he's made a mark on NYC real estate, and he's shaping the NYC skyline.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, we're so excited to have you, and so many interesting things, the career path that you've taken and the way that you've gotten into the industry has been unique.
Yep.
But I love the comparisons that you make to your former creative life, right? You have to be creative in the business that you're in right now.
Totally.
Are you Canadian?
I am. I was born in Montreal.
Yeah.
Certainly, I'm a Jersey kid as well. We came from Montreal to New Jersey, and then after that, I went NYU Film School for a bit and school in Arizona, and eventually settled in New York City to start my career as a filmmaker, which lasted all of 3 years.
Well,
What was your movie about?
It was a romantic comedy called What Are the Odds? Most interesting component is that the writer of the movie eventually went to write up a good part of the series of The Office, the American
There you
version of
go.
The So he did very well.
What kind of transpired? You got this movie in there. It did pretty well. Why did you feel like this is not something that you can kind of move forward with?
I was hoping that the success of the film would lead to a paying job, whether that was a TV commercial or another movie. And ultimately, I needed to live and work in New York City and pay my rent. That through the process of making movies, I was actually working on construction sites. What I quickly learned is that the process of building and construction was very similar to the art of producing and making films in the way that you have creative components, you have technical components, you have a finished product at the end. And I found the process of construction and development to be more accessible. Quickly got a lot of wins through my work for that company, and then very quickly actually started my own at-risk construction company in about 2004, and had my own at-risk GCCM firm from then till about 2016, when I pivoted to owners repping full time. So it was Greenlight Construction and Management. And when I pivoted to owners rep, I just took out the construction, threw in consulting, and almost immediately a developer client of mine, a friend, said that this was a terrible idea, that the word consulting is just abhorrent, and any self-respecting developer is going to see consulting in your name and just think you're just another layer, or worse, a redundant layer of middle management, and it was not going to work. But because I wanted to keep my email address the same, the GCM.
Right.
I love that.
I ignored that advice, and thankfully over the last 8 years, we've certainly proven him wrong.
Yeah.
And hopefully today we can talk about why an owner's rep is not only not redundant, but is absolutely essential to.
We're definitely going to get into that.
If anybody who's built anything, whether you've done your own bathroom or you're building a skyscraper, you know that there's literally a million decisions that need to get made. Yeah. And I think that's the overwhelm that's created through the process, is all of those decision points and what happens when certain decisions are made and what that leads to, and be able to paint that picture is a huge part of what an owner's rep should do.
It's like, you have these storyboards. You're envisioning what that finished product or film or project's going to look like. I think that the analogy makes sense, and the way that you apply it is great, because it really is. Those steps are the same. It's just a different product that you're getting at.
Totally. And just like in film, you have your storyboard, and then eventually you go to make the movie and you have reality. You have the reality of the budget. You have the reality of people not showing up to work.
Or messing up, or not getting the right actor.
Right, exactly. Right. But the producer, which is really I think the best analogy to owners repping or developer that you can make, because you're looking at every aspect of how something gets made.
Yeah.
It's the money, it's the schedule, it's the talent, it's putting the right people in the right room. I mean, it's having all those connections. It's incredibly important to know who to put in the room.
Know the right people to put in the right positions to make sure you have a good team for that particular project too, because every project's different. But I just wanted to pull back a little bit, because you started pretty much at the ground level. How did you learn this stuff?
I had a phenomenal mentor who taught me the right way to read drawings, the right way to estimate, the right way to write contracts and scopes of work. Jamie Kars is the owner of Urban Builders Group. He was my mentor during those years, and had a really, really good way of teaching and of being supportive of, because obviously I was new, I certainly made mistakes, and it was just this really wonderful iterative process of learning in real time with real people how things unfolded and how to fix them quickly. Mistakes will get made, but it's how fast you acknowledge it and correct it. And so a lot of the value systems which I picked up was really from him, and it was a tremendous sense of integrity. He's had a 25, 30, 40-year career. To be in construction and development for so long, really, I don't think anybody could say a bad word about the guy, and that's how I've tried to act throughout my career as well.
Yeah. Everybody knows this is a small industry,
Yep.
despite how large it is, right? Mm-hmm. But a lot of people know each other. The reputation is key.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
can you just explain what a project manager does?
our core focus at that time was high-end residential interiors, townhouses, and high-end retail. As a PM during those years, it was really about, initially trying to bring the interior designer or the architect's vision for that client into a tight budget, creating a budget for that set of drawings, which you would then compete with other contractors for. So once awarded the project, then what a project manager does is they say, okay, well, now we need to go and buy this budget from actual contractors on the street, and then manage those contractors to execute the work. And so initially, it's writing scopes of work for the subcontractors. So the drawings say one thing. You need to be able to understand not only what's on the drawing, but also what's not on the drawing, right? Because you don't want to go back to that client and say, here's a change order for something that they all thought was included, but that wasn't necessarily literally implied in the drawings.
Yeah.
And I think that's another reason why, some people are better at this than others, because they are able to understand what's there and also what's not there to get to the end. And what you end up having in high-end residential is you have an incredible attention to detail that needs to occur, and you have a lot of hand-holding with clients and with architects through a process which is incredibly emotional, because high-end residential interior is usually somebody's apartment, so they're going to live there. There's a connection and a subjectivity there that doesn't exist with institutional ground-up real estate. This is part of the thing that I initially loved, and then what I eventually grew to not enjoy.
Is the reason that you decided to then pivot and open up your own shop?
No, actually, the reason I pivoted is because in the year 2008, there was this thing.
Something might have happened.
I heard Lehman Brothers.
At that time, in this particular market, dried up, and we had a conversation. I said, I'm gonna leave, and I'm gonna start my own firm. And in my mind, I was relieving him from what was probably a financial burden at a time when there wasn't a lot of work. And in my mind, I knew that I could do the exact same thing, but with a much lower general conditions cost. I knew that people were still going to renovate and they were still going to build. They just didn't want to spend, as much money doing it. So what I was able to do was find people who wanted an apartment renovated, but they didn't mind that I was working out of my apartment and my general conditions costs were $5,000 or $10,000 a month, as opposed to what we were charging, which was much more.
Right.
But I was able to also leverage all of my relationships and connections with the same subs who did that work. But still, I was doing interiors, residential interiors.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
And I was doing commercial, and it was during that time where I started to realize that I wanted to change the skyline. So there was a point in time where I was doing the interior renovations, and I was owner's repping for a ground-up project.
Under Greenlight?
Under Greenlight.
So how did you convince people to give you that? And then now we can go into, I think, what an owner's rep is and what value they provide.
Right.
Which I think is significant.
I totally agree. It was actually a relationship. It was somebody who I had done other interior work for, who just felt that I had the integrity and the value system and the ability to produce or to get this done. And he understood that I hadn't done it before, but he knew that I could. And it was one of these things where it was a 10-year relationship with an individual who just wanted me in the room for the process of building the ground-up project. So, but what's interesting is that once I started doing that with him, it was all I wanted to do. And I ended up completely pivoting to owner's rep within 2-3 years of that moment, and shutting down the at-risk construction division entirely. And since then, the only thing I've been doing is ground-up development in New York City.
The owner's rep thing is very interesting to me because really you're acting like the owner. I mean, you don't have the ultimate decision, but you're essentially acting like a proxy almost for the developer, but maybe I'm misunderstanding it because you're shaking your head. So
I mean, it's interesting because for different developers, it's different. Some call me program manager, some call me project manager, some want to call me construction manager, some want to call me, it's the owner's rep, right, or consultant. If for different developers, there's different needs, and as an owner's rep, what's the most important thing is identifying what that need is, right? So is the need to relieve overwhelm and bandwidth from a developer? So basically do all of the things that they don't have the time to do, or is the need to fill an experience gap that they might not have? So for different projects and for different developers, it's different. Sometimes they just want budgets and schedules, right? And sometimes they want quality control. They want us to be on site all the time, looking at the work and comparing it to the requisitions coming from contractors. So budget control and cost control. Some want us to do everything, right? And we almost act as a fee developer, even though we're not a fee developer, but in some cases we're actually acting as the developer. All decisions ultimately go up to the developer to approve and to sign. So we don't make any decisions for people ever. It's always, this is the decision tree. This is our recommendation and why it's our recommendation.
what is the pool of developers that you mostly work with? I would imagine, at least, and I'm always going to give my opinion, is large developers will generally do a lot of things in-house. Sometimes they'll do the legal work in-house and basically everything.
Yeah.
But ones that are doing smaller projects, just getting started, or just don't have the manpower, want to keep themselves lean, they would generally hire owner's rep. But maybe you can tell me what your experience has been.
Our experience has been a lot of family offices, people who don't have robust teams of project managers on staff, or people who have just a few project managers and they need to supplement. Somebody might have like a really strong construction department, but they might not have a strong design and finish component, right? Where they don't have like an architect or a designer on staff to help oversee those particular consultants and soft costs. So a developer's journey really starts with a tremendous amount of chutzpah and vision, and it's an incredibly high stakes, high risk, high reward, speculative endeavor. And ultimately, it's a series of many decisions over sometimes a 2 to 3 year period.
Probably sometimes even more.
And at the end of that process, right, you have the opportunity to change the skyline of New York City.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I mean, so it's a little bit of ego too.
I mean, chutzpah is a great word.
Yeah.
And I agree. It's like, how do you take on, right, the guarantees you're signing when you take on a construction loan, the liquidity that you have to have, and it could be catastrophic. You read it in The Real Deal all the time. Like, so people get decimated.
Oh, totally. So to continue that thought, what is a developer's project? What's the starting point, right? It's the pro forma.
Yeah.
It's a series of numbers on a piece of paper that's created before anything has actually been put on the street and done, right? And what's the most important financial instrument tied to those numbers? It's debt, right? Yeah. They're taking on that risk and that debt based off the numbers that they're putting, those assumptions.
Can I pay this off?
Can I pay this off?
And also the lender's looking at that too, by the way.
Of course, right? And to your point, what comes with debt, right? It comes with personal guarantees. It comes with sometimes a floating rate that changes with the market.
Yeah, always a floating rate.
And almost immediately, once the project starts, the inertia and the pressure from the market is constantly pushing a developer to spend more money.
Yeah.
And the role of an owner's rep is to keep those forces at bay as much as possible all the time. And that's really where the heavy lifting comes from, is from keeping the balance on the debt in check so that you're not out of balance, so that the project is able to move forward. And so the developer can focus on his vision, and he can focus on the high leverage relationships with equity stakeholders and debt stakeholders. And the owner's rep can deal with the neighbor license agreements and getting all of the proposals from everybody. Yeah. All that time that's spent, getting your house in order is really where the owner's rep should be focusing their time, so that the developer can actually stay and make sure that their vision is being executed at that
It
high
sounds
level.
like the earlier you come on board, the better.
I think the most successful projects I've ever had is when we've been at the start. As you know from our prior conversations, we do a lot of stalled site turnaround work, and it was through doing so many turnarounds that we actually learned how to solve more problems, because those projects tend to have the most.
That's an interesting thing to me. I don't think we've talked about this, which is when somebody runs into trouble. And then you kind of step in as the firefighter that's putting out those fires. We lawyers always act as firefighters.
That's our bread and butter.
It could be hundreds of thousands a day.
A perfect real situation that happens all the time. You're in foundations, and a neighbor, and you're underpinning a neighbor's property, and you've got optical monitors and vibration monitors set up, and unfortunately, due to soil conditions or whatever happens, the neighbor's building starts to lean one way or the other. And we've all seen these foundations with steel rakers holding up the neighbor's building. That is a perfect example of a immediate stop work order, emergency remediation, and shoring operation. And what doesn't stop? The debt clock, right? It's not like it's not stopping so that you can get your affair.
And your maturity date doesn't change. Yeah.
So,
and in fact, they can maybe call a default, so it could be
right,
a catastrophe.
So then it becomes a conversation, right, with the developer. What are my options? What can we do to make up time? What can we create a rescue schedule somewhere else in the critical path where we can make up the time that we're losing here, so that at least the schedule isn't impacted.
Going back to your first ground up experience, what do you think you would tell yourself at that time, if you can go back in time and say, now I'm going to do things differently? I realize now that this is something that I should have done or thought about.
And one thing that I always tell my developer clients when given an opportunity to work from the beginning, as opposed to coming in as a firefighter midway through, is the success of a project is usually determined with the early work that you do in terms of setting up the right contracts and the right relations with the right people. And so I've learned from some of the best people in the business of how that should look for different types of projects.
Yeah.
And I think that really getting those early documents right, getting the contracts with the consultants and the contractors and everybody, and having them all be aligned in a way that creates an opportunity for success. Not just then, but 2 years from then.
It's seeing that picture, right? And, and then trying to predict how it's going to end so that you can put out those fires before the fire breaks out in the first place.
100%. And then to bookend that, right, is knowing when the situation does not need an attorney. Recently, I was brought into a project by an attorney to solve what was a very, very dysfunctional and conflict-ridden relationship between a contractor and an owner. And I was brought in to help the owner manage that I would say very quickly upon entering into the conversation and being retained. I realized that there was just a miscommunication. People weren't speaking the same language. The contractor, he was talking to me, and I'm like, okay, I understand what you're saying. And I talked to the owner, and he's explaining what his issues were. I'm like, I also understand what you're saying. And then I was able to actually just translate where they were each coming from, and we ended up finishing the project beautifully with no conflict. And it was just one of those things where the contract was there, and it was important to have the contract there, but at the end of the day, we were able to resolve it without going through that, just by bridging a gap in communication and understanding.
If both sides know where they're coming from and you can explain to them in a manner then they can understand, you can come to a conclusion. But you're right, sometimes a lawyer is not the person to do that. You need someone like yourself who can explain it to the different sides. It makes sense.
Sometimes it's communicating and explaining things to the lender or the bank engineer or the equity partners, whoever they want me to communicate with. It's being able to go into that room and speak that language and contextualize something for others in the room, and then also to again explain what that decision tree and what that path looks like moving forward.
You also started and co-founded another company called Keeler Markwood Group, and you did a project, 8 Chester Avenue, which is workforce housing, and you also dealt with the Industrial Development Agency in Westchester.
Yeah.
This idea of workforce housing is an interesting concept. What the IDA is and how did you work with them to get this? Because generally you couldn't get, in New York, you can't get for residential. It has to be a commercial project. You have to show certain, that you're bringing certain jobs in, things like that. If you don't come in, that it's not going to bring in this money, this revenue. I think it's a very interesting topic, and I don't think one that we've really discussed in detail on this podcast.
No, and I'm glad you brought this up because I don't think of it too much, but this is something where I was the developer, right? Where I was the name on the personal guarantee, and I'm the one that's worried about the debt clock, right? So again, just being able to identify with those issues for my clients, quote unquote, being under the knife myself, gives me a unique perspective of like, I know how you feel. I know what,
Right.
So,
it's easier to be a rep when your neck isn't on the line, right?
Exactly,
Right.
right? So the fact that my neck is very much on the line and that I've gone through this process. And by the way, not an easy process. Like, hats off to developers. Workforce housing. That was housing that is accessible for the people who work and live in White Plains, whether it's at the hospital or at the bars and restaurants on Mamaroneck Avenue or at the colleges in the area. We did some market research and we found you either have these old apartments that are affordable, but they're really old and when we toured them, not kept up, or you have brand new rental buildings with high, a lot of amenities and really high rent. And we thought, okay, well, how do we provide housing for the workforce? And what we decided was all studio apartments, right? We want to keep the rent somewhere just north of $2,000 a month, whereas the next comparable apartment in White Plains was $2,600 a month, for example. To pull it off required a lot of dialogue with the city of White Plains. It required a lot of their buy-in. They had to rezone this particular street in order to allow us to go from 10,000 feet to 60,000 feet, right? So, and obviously they loved and appreciated that developers were coming into the city wanting to build workforce housing. But in addition to that, in order to build apartments that are that affordable compared to the comparable apartments in the city, required us building it for a lot less than everybody else was building for. So in White Plains, a typical ground-up project is getting built for $300, $350, $400 a foot buildable. In order for us to make our pro forma work and to make this model work for our investors and everybody, was to build it between $200 and $250 a foot, which is a huge
Right.
lift.
It's like
Well, that's where your
40%.
value engineering comes in.
And cost cutting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so obviously you the IDA gave a little bit of a bump.
So important. The project would not be possible without the IDA.
A lot of people don't know who the IDA is. You probably were tuned into the IDA and what they do.
We were tuned in. There's other projects that we looked at in Portchester and in other areas. The IDA is unique in Westchester. Different cities have different relationships. Some cities in Westchester have an IDA in that particular municipality. And then there's a Westchester IDA. In White Plains, it's the Westchester IDA.
So what was that process like?
So it's a well-oiled machine, at least in White Plains, very professionally handled. The only thing I will say is that it's not predictable. In White Plains, you want to be able to know when you're doing your pro forma, or if you're, when you're going to raise your capital stack, you want to know what's the pilot that I'm going to get, right? That process started somewhere, but we ended up somewhere different, not all the way where we wanted to be, but maybe we got halfway there, to the point where it actually became a feasible project. And I think that was
That's huge.
Yeah.
that was the most important
Yeah.
part, is we told them, until we get to this threshold, the project's simply not feasible. But then, and this is why I want to throw my hat in the ring for any developers who want to go to White Plains, managing the IDA process through construction is another very specific and unique and important process that you need to get right.
Yeah.
It is not the type of thing where they approve you for an IDA and now you just build. No,
Right.
you need to comply with the requirements in the IDA agreement. You need to
Which are non-negotiable, by the way.
non-negotiable. You need to.
I tried.
Yeah. No, you absolutely need to reach out to the unions. You need to get local manpower, and they are going to come and look at people's driver's licenses and look at payroll statements, and they are going to do their homework, and they're incredibly professional and good at it, and they will keep you honest. And if you don't do it, they have the ability to claw back the pilot.
Yeah, which is the payment in lieu of taxes.
Correct. I just had this conversation with a developer who is coming to White Plains, okay? And they were picking my brain, and they were talking about the IDA. I do stuff like this, and I have conversations with developers well before I ever get hired. It's a long process.
Right.
And so frequently I'll just meet with people who are development curious.
I love that.
I like that term.
Did you just come up with that?
I just came up with that right now.
That
Love
was
it. We're
very.
using that.
That was excellent.
We're
This is what I
using
love
that.
about when you're talking like this. Things just come to your brain. But that's excellent. I
I'm
really
going to
like that
create a
term.
billing matter called Development Curious.
I have conversations like this with people all the time, right? It has nothing to do with me being their owner's rep. It's just people who are interested in the process. I love talking about it. I could do this all day.
I couldn't tell.
So I said, you haven't signed your GMP yet or your CMA with your contractor. I said, the compliance component of your IDA agreement largely rests on your contractor to get
Yeah.
those payroll
Yeah.
statements, to get all this stuff. You need to make sure, please, that within that agreement, you're ensuring that they're going to comply with the IDA, because of how important it is that you get that IDA. And those clawback provisions are real.
Yeah.
And don't take them lightly. It's not like, oh, they'll slap you on the wrist.
No.
No, they will fully claw back your IDA money. So when I talk about the foundation of that project and those early agreements being so important, if you just sign a GMP and you don't make sure that there are penalties and incentives for the contractor to comply with the IDA, 2 years later, when you're actually going to get your thing, if they haven't done all of that work in White Plains to comply with what they need, you're in a really tough place
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah.
What is it about your project that's obviously it's workforce, it's something that's necessary, but is there anything else that really got the IDA interested? Because a lot of people do get rejected for it.
The project wouldn't be possible without it. So it was always, when is this conversation going to happen? And so we worked with Eon and Cuddy and Fader pretty early to have those conversations. The specifics of it came about through what felt like a very arbitrary process.
And it was just absolutely wonderful to have you on. You have
Thank you. Same.
such knowledge about this stuff, and in so many different aspects. If you do have something that you want to plug, or if there's something that I didn't ask you that you want to maybe mention, or you thought about it, like, oh, I wish we could have talked about that, now is definitely your opportunity.
I love talking about it, and I love helping people. So if anybody is curious and wants to learn more about the process or wants to learn about how we can help, they should just find my contact info.
Yeah, we'll put it in the notes.
Yeah.
Put it in the notes and just call me.
Yeah. Or Google Greenlight Consulting and
Greenlight, GCM-NYC.com. And I know I'm incredibly accessible. Put my cell phone number, have people call me.
My gosh,
directly.
people
We don't
say
need that.
you just give out your personal cell phone number?
I do.
When
You're
you
the
want-
second person that comes here and say that. We just,
Listen,
I
I
just
I
can't
get my
fathom
cell
it.
phone. I want to be accessible so people can contact me if they need anything. If it's that personal touch, right? People want to know they can reach you if they see Sal and they're like, I know
That's
I
it.
can
I
reach
know
this
I
guy.
can reach this guy. Yeah,
exactly. It's just it's a mindset, and I think
Fine.
you have the right one.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you exactly. And you've just been, like I said, a wonderful guest. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for taking the time and and being
Thank
here.
you so much
And,
for
Thank
being
you
yeah.
for
This was a
coming.
lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we had a great time.
we had
too.
a lot of fun.
And we learned, which is what we love
Yeah.
too. All
Thanks,
right.
guys.
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, everyone, that's our show. Thanks so much for listening.
And of course, don't forget to subscribe. Also, don't forget to leave comments. We would love to hear from you.
Yeah, feel free to reach out at info@sideandshine.com or visit our website at sideandshine.com. We really look forward to hearing from you.
You can also reach out to Brenda, Camille, and me at bslakowski@sideandshine.com, C. Almeida at sideandshine.com, and D. Shamshovich at sideandshine.com.
Those are lengthy last names. You can just find us on our website.
That's right.